Everyone, please join me in Gasho and repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nam Mandaps, Nam Mandaps, Nam Mandaps, Nam. Good morning, everyone. I am quite surprised to see as many Dharma School students as I do, but it's a wonderful surprise. But as we all know, we are in the season of spring break. We are in the season of spring break. So I believe some universities have already finished their spring break. Some elementary schools, middle schools, and high school have just started their spring break. We all need a break sometimes, right? We all need to be able to relax, and then of course around the temple and around the city, all over the place, we're seeing beautiful blossoms blooming everywhere. It is a wonderful sight to see. Today's Dharma talk will once again be reflecting on the second of the three treasures, which is the Dharma. The Dharma, as we all know, means teaching, law, or truth. The Buddha's teaching of the truth, right? The Buddha's teaching of the reality that is true reality. We, as unenlightened people, unfortunately, are not able to see reality as it is. So, all of us here, Dharma school students and adults alike, have differing opinions on things from time to time. Who here likes cheesecake? Okay, so some people raised their hands, others didn't. Who here likes white rice? White rice. Okay, all right, some people raise their hand. Who here likes brown rice? Who here likes oatmeal? Who here likes cream of wheat? How many of you know what cream of wheat actually is? How many of you like pancakes? Right? How many of you like buttermilk pancakes? Okay. How many of you like tofu? Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. How many of you like pickles? Pickles. Okay, this is odd. I was hoping that there would be less people raised. Okay, how many of you like onions on your burgers? Oh man. Okay. Cheese. Okay, how many of you like cheese? Okay. Oh, okay, here we go. I know, I have something. Okay. For Thanksgiving. Okay, how many of you would rather have ham or turkey? So, raise your hands if you would rather have turkey for Thanksgiving. How many of you would rather have ham for Thanksgiving? Okay. All right, see, so we do have some differing opinions on these matters, okay? So I could clearly see, okay, I was able to get this, right? So now, how many of you, here's a better question. How many, when you put butter on your toast, how many of you put the butter on the top? On the top, okay. How many of you put the butter on the bottom? You put, okay, one person. Good, okay. How many of you don't use butter at all? Okay, very good. So when we talk about the Buddha seeing the truth, right, the Buddha is seeing things just as they are. Yet we as people, as unenlightened beings, sometimes can get caught up in the way that we do things. We can sometimes get caught up in thinking that the way we do things is the right way, right? The way that we do things is the best way, the most efficient way. And, this leads to sometimes couples arguing. Like this past week, we were working on Tokudo training, and Reverend Cindy had a differing opinion than I did. And I thought to myself, at first I thought, of course, my first initial reaction was, no, it's always been done this way. This is how it should be done. But Reverend Cindy actually suggested this other way of doing it, and we tried it, and it actually worked better. So I said to myself, wow, I guess I was wrong, right? But in actuality, what the Buddha really sees is that there is no right and wrong way. The Buddha sees the ultimate truth, right? We as unenlightened beings don't see that. We see what our, what our bias tells us. We see the way that we've been taught, right? We've seen what we see or what we know is handed down to us from our parents, who was handed down to them from their parents, etc., etc. And these things that we believe, or the things that we practice, or the way that we do things, always, don't always align with each other, right? And that's what can sometimes lead to arguments, what sometimes leads to discord. And this is what the Buddha was able to resolve for all of us. This is what the Buddha was able to help us with in terms of teaching us the Dharma, right? Is that in actuality, right, in truth, there is no right or wrong way, especially when it comes to our opinions of what the right and wrong way is. So, like, one of the best examples of this, I feel, in terms of Prince Siddhartha or Shakyamuni Buddha, right, was the Buddha's life, right? There was the whole idea that his father, King Suddhodana, wanted his son to become a great, powerful king just like he did. I'm certain many fathers in the congregation and everywhere else, right, have sort of aspirations for their children, right? They have aspirations, and mothers too, parents in general have aspirations for their children, thinking, oh, we want them to maybe be this. In Japan, it's much worse because, when you are the son of a minister, you are expected to become a minister, right? That's a little bit different than here. But, what did King Suddhodana do? He thought, if I surround my son with nothing but luxury, with nothing but what the palace life is, if I surround my son with nothing but good things and powerful things and beautiful clothing and delicious food, my son will know nothing else. My son will, only see this reality, right? And this is the only thing that my son will want. But what ended up happening, Prince Siddhartha became tired of these things. He became disillusioned, disenchanted by this wonderful life. Now, I am certain that many of you have a favorite hotel that you may like to stay at. You probably have your favorite vacation resort. How many of you like to go to Disneyland? Nobody? Nobody? Yeah, I love to go. I love going to Disneyland. I used to love going to Disneyland as a kid, and we would usually go like every once in a while. So it was always fun for me. But can you all imagine what it would be like going to Disneyland every single day of your life? You probably have the chance to ride all of the rides. You have a chance to eat all of the food that Disneyland has to offer. And believe me, Disneyland has a whole lot to offer. They have a whole lot to offer. But if you went there every day for the whole time, I can guarantee you that you might become pretty tired of it. You might become disillusioned with it. Now, yes, there is a Guinness Book World Record holder. I can't remember his name, but he's gone to Disneyland for, I think, like a consistent 2,000 some odd days, like every day. And I can't imagine what his reality must be like. But I can tell you now that after going to Disneyland for probably, a short amount of time, every day for, more than a week, I would probably become really, really tired. I would become really, really tired. And sadly, the wonderful and beautiful things will no longer become special to me anymore. This is our changing nature of what reality is. This is our perception, right? This is our bias. This is our inner workings trying to calculate and move us into different directions. The Buddha was able to see the truth behind it all. We all have a desire to go to Disneyland. We all have a desire to do things our way. We all have a desire to, have our opinion be proven correct. But what the Buddha tells us is that this is our self-centered ego trying to grasp onto the illusion of control, trying to grasp to the illusion of control. that we are totally in charge of our reality, that we are totally in charge of how we do things, or that we are the ones who are correct or mostly correct. This is the illusion, and this is what the Buddha tries to gently remind us day after day after day. And this is what the Dharma gives us, that this type of reality or this type of illusion, right, totally comes from the sense of self, the sense of ego. And what the Buddha was able to do was be able to provide us a path with relinquishing ourselves from that desire. We are going to struggle with these desires and these illusions throughout the rest of our lifetimes. But thanks to the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, we are able to sometimes see past those things from time to time. We are able to genuinely listen to another person's opinion, or realize that we might not always be right about how to do things. Once we have that, we can realize that we didn't come to this conclusion on our own, but because of the wisdom and compassion of Shakyamuni Buddha and Amida Buddha. This is the truth that the Dharma provides for us. It's not something we can always see every single day because we live in this world of samsara. We are unenlightened ourselves. But from time to time, and when we genuinely listen to the Dharma, and we listen to others, and we listen to the people who offer us a differing view, and we realize that I may not always be right. I may not always be the one who holds all of the answers. We can sincerely put our hands together in gratitude and say, Namo Amida Butsu, literally translating as, I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite light and life. How grateful we are that this Dharma is here to provide us with the guidance to live our lives in this way. So I thank you all for coming today for our first Sunday service in April. It is already April, hooray! And I sincerely look forward to seeing you all next weekend. And for those of you who are on spring break, and if you are watching from Zoom, or if you are going to watch it on YouTube later, I sincerely hope you all enjoy your spring breaks. But until that time, until we see each other again in person, please join me in Gassho. And repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats. Will you all please join me in Gassho? Clearly, we know then that the Nembutsu is not a self-power practice performed by foolish beings or sages. It is therefore called the practice of not directing virtue on the part of beings. Masters of the Mahayana and Hinayana and people burdened with karmic evil, whether heavy or light, should all in the same way take refuge in the great treasure ocean of the selected vow and attain Buddhahood through the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida
Namo
Butsu.
Amida Butsu.
Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo
Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.
Good morning again, everyone. I always find this time of year very interesting because it was just raining early this morning. And while we were chanting, we actually were able to get some bits of sunlight coming through the windows here. And it is a beautiful, beautiful time, I think. But it also, I think, has the perfect representation of what life is as we see it as Buddhists, right? There are times of rain, times of shine, and sometimes they can act as quickly as like a snap of a finger, right? You could instantly come, boom, like as you could instantly have this instant sunshine, but then all of a sudden rain comes. And then even a couple of days ago, there was hail as well. So all of these things are happening like constantly and coming at us actually, beyond our control as well. And this is actually goes in line with the theme of the Dharma that we've been talking about. but especially us as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, right? Sometimes when we are asked as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, right, well, you're Buddhists, right? So what's your practice? Do you guys, take your Buddha beads and you kind of count the times the breaths you take when you meditate? Do you sit in silent meditation for hours on end? Do you have these hard debates that some of these Tibetan monks do? People often ask us, what our practice is. And of course, as Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, we always respond with, nope, none of those are our practices. And then people go, what? Well, then what do you do? To which we respond, we say the Nembutsu. We say Namo Amida Butsu. We say, I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite light and life. And so, first, of course, we're asked this question of well, what do you do? What's your practice, right? What is your practice? And when, we respond with this, at first they go, that's all you do? That's all you say? You just put your hands together and say, Namo Amida Butsu? That seems too easy. And that's true. We are the Buddhist path of easy practice. But I like to, once again, view this as sort of a difference between a large ship and a small ship. And in this instance, I would think that the hard practices and the tenuous practices that many of the monks do on a daily basis, right, is kind of like going onto a small ship. Not everybody has the same stamina or the desire or the inkling to become said monk or to become a Buddhist priest. Even though I myself am a Buddhist priest, I definitely don't take the same precepts that the monks do. I definitely still eat meat, and I'm married. I have attachments to my I have attachments to my things, right? Like I like my cell phone, I like my car, I am attached to my pet. I have all these attachments. And yet there is still a Buddhist path for me, right? Even though I have all of these attachments, even though I have all these wants and desires, and from the previous Dharma talk, I have various opinions, and I have strong opinions on some things, more neutral opinions on others. There is still a Buddhist path for me, and that is saying Namo Amida Butsu. And it's not just, and by the way, it's not putting our hands together and saying, okay, if I say Namo Amida Butsu, that gives me, or that makes me more powerful, or that makes me as a person, right? That makes me more enlightened than the other person, right? That's not what's going on here. What's going on here when we are saying Namo Amida Butsu is we are, in fact, expressing our deep, sincere gratitude to that of Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion. The wisdom and compassion that continuously works, the working of the Dharma, even in this lifetime, even right now, even right here. This working that continues to move all of us to chant the same thing when we chant Shoshin Nembutsuge. It was beautiful to listen to. I love chanting Shoshinge with all the members chanting with me. It is a beautiful thing to listen to because we are all taking refuge in that teaching. When we all put our hands together and say Namo Amida Butsu, we are all taking refuge, but also expressing our deep and sincere appreciation to the wisdom and compassion that is Amida Buddha. So when we say it, right, when we are saying Namo Amida Butsu, we're not we're not punching in a secret code that gives us, that gives us special powers or more insight. We are realizing that this wisdom and compassion is directed to us from the Pure Land. This is being freely given to us. But how can I best put it in terms of the here and now? Well, it's like when we read books. Right? It's like when we read books or when we listen to a teacher or professor's great lecture. We come to this realization that this teacher and professor doesn't just speak from their own head. They kind of do, right? But, there was a whole lot of study that went into that lecture, right? They're not just coming up with something on the spot. They're not just saying, okay, well, let's see, today I'm going to talk about such and such. And the same thing goes, when we read books. we often just take books for granted, right? Or we just see the book and we go, okay, this book is here, it's solid, I can open it and I can read it, right? But what we don't see is all of the work that goes into this, right? This is the translation of the larger sutra. First off, do you know what goes into translating something from Chinese into English, or from Chinese, from Japanese, then into English? It is a really long process. And it's not just by one person, too. There has to be a whole committee of people to come together who speak multiple languages and agree that this is the best way to translate this language, right? This is the best way to translate this. When we receive it here, and we can, of course, and not only the fact of that, right? We realize we can read this book because we received a public education that, taught us how to read, how to, read basics, right? We were taught how to do these things. So all of this working, right? It's not just myself reading this book. I had to have teachers who taught me how to read. I had to have parents who forced me to read. And my father, right? My father, speaking of my father, would actually have a dictionary. When I would have to do reading homework from elementary school, he would have a dictionary next to me. And when I would come across a word that I didn't understand, he would go, "What does that word mean?" And I would say, "I don't know." And he would go, "Look it up." And I, of course, would get frustrated and angry, and I would be like, ugh. But he would force me to look in the dictionary. These kinds of activities, these things. So when we say Namo Amida Butsu, when we receive this teaching, right, Namo Amida Butsu, it's not just coming from like, okay, it's me putting my hands together, right? It's also me acknowledging that countless kalpas, countless long periods of time of hard work and study and understanding went into this long range of Buddhist practice that brought us to here where we are today. All of these other powers have been working to give us this benefit today. As people and as humans, we want things concrete here, right now, in front, so I can touch it, so I can see it, so I can taste it, I can, have it in my hand. But we don't consider the hard work that goes into the way, the teachings and the nembutsu that we receive to this very day. So what can we do, right, but to put our hands together and say, Namo Amida Butsu, I take refuge in the Buddha of infinite light and life. It becomes almost mind-blowing how much work has gone into bringing us to where we are today, that we are able to stand here or sit here and receive the teachings from Shinran Shonin, that we are able to receive the nembutsu from Amida Buddha, all of these things from outside of ourselves. And this isn't to belittle or to say that the accomplishments that we each individually have done in our lives are to be belittled, right? I'm not belittling that, or I'm not, taking credit away from that at all. But when we look at the bigger picture, as we Buddhists are encouraged to do almost on a daily basis, we realize that we are part of a greater source of wisdom and compassion, that we ourselves are receiving this wisdom and compassion from the Pure Land, and that this must always be acknowledged and this must always be remembered. Hence, why we place our hands together and say, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu isn't going to make you pass your tests, right? Namo Amida Butsu isn't going to get you the winning lottery numbers. Namo Amida Butsu isn't going to get you that raise that you wanted, right? Namo Amida Butsu isn't going to help you find love, right? There's actually a shrine in Japan where you can go to if you want love or if you want to find a partner, right? And that's not what's going to happen. Namo Amida Butsu is acknowledging and saying thank you to the infinite wisdom and compassion that is given to us on a daily basis, on an every second basis, this Dharma that continues to work purely for our benefit. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you all for joining us today for our first Sunday service in April. As we continue to traverse these interesting times and interesting weather, please recite the Nembutsu. Join me in Gassho. Clearly, we know then that the Nembutsu is not a self-power practice performed by foolish beings or sages. It is therefore called the practice of not directing virtue on the part of beings. Masters of the Mahayana and Hinayana and people burdened with karmic evil, whether heavy or light, should all in the same way take refuge in the great treasure ocean of the selected vow and attain Buddhahood through the Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats.